Austin. We are going to back up to the day that you were arrested in Vancouver. That morning when you were arrested, you were taken to the police department, and that's the first time that you had any contact with law enforcement regarding what had occurred on January 23rd, 2017 with the killing of Fabio, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you went to this police station, just to go through the sequence of events, you were arrested by officers and then you were transported to Vancouver Police Department, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you were put in the cell with the undercover agent, it's been referred to as a Perkins agent, but do you know the term Perkins?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
Well, thank you. The term Perkins, then, it was an undercover agent that you thought was a cellmate, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you testified to, in the beginning, you were uncomfortable. Now, is that correct with this talking?
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding that undercover agent, you actually did discuss the defendant with that undercover agent in certain respects, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you recall, you were put in the cell and then the Detective Farrell came in. Do you remember him coming to you and telling you basically, we know you were there, we just want to know what happened in between. We know you were there, we know how you left, we want to know what happened in between. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then when Mr. Farrell left, you were left alone with your cellmate, who you believe to be another inmate with you in custody, I should call it.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So you brought up, and this is for reference, the Perkins transcript, page 106 for counsel. You actually did bring up, and that's line 4 through 7, you did bring up the defendant, the female, and it was sparked because you knew that there was a lady involved. Farrell had told you that those were arrested, right? So
Yes,
that
ma'am.
Baker and a female. The word lady was used, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that point, your cellmate.
Objection, that was some facts not in evidence, Your Honor.
At that point, your cellmate, the undercover agent, said, "And the bitch, who they got. Did you ever meet that bitch?" And you said, "Uh-huh. Seen her, but I don't know her." Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the topic of Monica, or the defendant, I should say, was brought up by the cellmate, and you admitted that you...
This states the evidence Monica is not correct.
She indicated that. Overruled.
Not the specific name, Mr. Austin, but the female, and you knew who it was in reference to, the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that was brought up, and you said, "But I don't know her." Correct?
Yes.
Defense asked you a lot of questions about that statement about you don't know her. Today, do you know her?
No.
And when you say, "I don't know her," what does that mean?
Favorite color, cereal, what you like to watch, what do you like to do for hobbies, birthday, what type of things do you like to shop for, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what are your coping skills.
So to this day, when you say, "I don't know her," she was never a friend of yours, right?
Yes.
But you knew who she was.
Yes.
So were you ever denying that you knew who this defendant was?
No.
You just don't know her personally. You didn't have a personal relationship with the defendant of any nature.
That is correct.
And is that consistent with what you've repeatedly said in every single interview as well as here in trial?
That is correct.
Detective Farrell then pulls you out for an interview. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was Detective Farrell and Detective Byers. They put you in that room and they interviewed you. And at that point, did they advise you or let you know, your Miranda rights, it's called, that you have a right to an attorney, you can have an attorney present?
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about maybe I should have attorney, maybe I shouldn't, correct?
Yes.
And they let you make a decision, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you feel at any point like you were coerced into talking to either of the detectives without an attorney?
No, ma'am.
Did you actually tell them that you wanted to talk to them?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is it that you want? Why did you want to talk to them at that point? What's going on in your mind that you felt like you wanted to talk to them?
At that moment in time, I didn't want to play with them. If they flew all the way up and had me pulled over and brought in to have me answer questions, I didn't want to waste their time.
Okay. At that time, is it fair that, for lack of better words, are you freaking out? Are you stressed out?
Very much so.
Are you thinking about now your culpability, what you did, and your role?
Yes.
In this moment, when you've been arrested after 7 years of not hearing from any law enforcement, and you've been arrested and you've been told that you have a warrant for your arrest, are you thinking about everybody else involved, or are you thinking about yourself and your role at this time?
I'm only thinking about myself and my role at that point in time.
So when you testified with the detectives and you told them that you had stabbed...
Objection to what testifying.
That's correct.
That's fine. Sorry. When you interviewed with the detectives and you told them that you had stabbed the defendant, was that a way of getting something off your chest?
Yes.
Did you ever go in that conversation to the whole pre-planning conversation about how it all came together, or was this more of a confessional to your role?
It was a confessional to my role.
During that interview, though, you were asked about other individuals, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were actually asked by the detectives some questions. So Monica, or the defendant, did come up in those interviews in Washington in October of 2024.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's not like the topic of the defendant never came up, right?
Objection. This states the evidence on the defendant.
Stop. We talked about this.
Sorry.
It would be overruled as to that. It is leading.
Okay, well, let me... Page 54 of the interview, lines 14, starting at line 14. One moves to the page. To interview. Let's start at line 5. Page 52. 52 of the interview in Washington. Detective Farrell asks you, how did you, when he said, we're going to go rough her up, dude, how did he know when to go? Was he talking to her? And you said, I believe so. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then Detective Farrell said, were you present when he was talking to her? There's no response at that point. Detective Farrell asked you, so what makes you believe that? You responded, he would tell me. Detective Farrell asked you, say what? Like what? You responded, she says she's in the house. And then you corrected it. She said he's in the house. Are you referring to the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Farrell said, okay. Detective Byers commented, that's obviously before. And you said yes. Detective Byers followed up with, and then at that point, it's go time from him. Like when he says, she says he's in the house. Like, okay, let's go, and you agreed. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you did talk about the defendant's role in this plan to kill the defendant in Washington with the detectives.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, on page 66 of the interview. Line 1, you brought up, I remember him saying she's going to get some money. We're off. We're good. I was like, oh, okay, cool. There's some small talk and jumping down. Detective Byers asked you, did you ever get money? You said, I don't know. Or did he ever get money? I'm sorry. You said, I don't know. Then Detective Byers asks you, did you ever get any amount of money from this? And you responded, you gave me a couple of gold coins from his collection. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he ever tell you where those gold coins came from?
The detective?
Yes. I'm sorry, no. Baker.
Later he did. Yeah, he told me it came from the safe.
Page 95. And during this interview then, you were put back in the cell then, okay? So after you talked to them, you talked about Monica's, or the defendant's role in this, that she told Baker he's in the house now, so you knew when to go. They put you back in the cell then with the undercover agent, and at that point, did you feel free to start talking a little bit, no more, because now you had interviewed with the detectives?
A little bit, yeah.
And did you start talking to that agent some more?
Yes.
Did you tell him any of the things that you talked about in the interview?
Yes.
And this is the Perkins transcript, page 122. Actually, we'll start on 121, line 19. When you were put back in the cell, the agent asked you, what did they say? And you said, I don't know. I asked for an attorney after I talked to the investigators. I'm honest with them, so. And the agent responded, so basically you told him the truth. You said, actually because of that woman. What woman were you referring to?
The defendant.
The agent then asked you, he said something, who the fuck is Monica? Is that the bitch? And you said, I think that's her name, yeah. So again, you brought up the defendant to this undercover agent, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then down on line 24, you told the agent, I was honest. And the agent said, to me, it sounded like the bitch is the one who planned this shit. I think defense actually asked you that question. And you agreed and you said, yeah, she did. And again, this is in Washington, the day that you were arrested.
Yes, ma'am.
The agent asked you, what was the fucking reason? And at that point in Washington, the day you're arrested, you told that undercover agent insurance money. And you also stated he was an abusive husband. So you did know about the insurance money, and you told the detectives about that even in Washington, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
When you stated that he was an abusive husband, is that what you were told by Baker?
Yes, ma'am.
The undercover agent then asked you how much insurance. And you stated, I wasn't going to get any of that, and I'm mad that I was even part of it. The agent followed up with, I'm going to use his grammar, you wasn't going to get any of it, what the fuck? You stated, I just didn't believe it until it hits to the thing. I just don't believe it. The agent asked you, did your uncle ever get any of the money? You stated, I don't think so. Then the agent responded, hold on, how long after did he go to jail? You stated a few months. The agent, he ain't get shit. You stated, yeah, they both got locked up. The agent then stated, so basically this bitch wanted y'all to come get the nigga so she can get insurance money. It must have been some millions. And you agreed and said, I think so. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You never said to this agent who's undercover, who you don't know is being recorded, no, 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 no. She wasn't involved. You agreed with them.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that was the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
That was your belief,
Yes, ma'am.
that she was going to get this insurance money.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that's what Baker had told you.
Yes, ma'am.
So after this interview then, I'm sorry, not interview, but you're in this cell, you're talking to the agent. And by the way, I think a reference was made to calling the defendant a bitch, or words to that effect. None of these detectives called her that kind of name to you, correct?
That is correct.
And certainly, I didn't call her anything like that, correct?
That is correct.
And you never referred to her as that.
No, ma'am.
That was stimulation coming, or words coming from the undercover agent who you were talking to, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So at some point then you asked, when you were in the cell with the agent, the detectives never came to you and said, the DA's here and wants to talk to you, right?
That is correct.
You asked because they mentioned that the DA was in Washington. It was you who asked to talk to me.
Yes, ma'am.
And when I came in to meet you, what did I advise you?
Of my Miranda rights.
And did I tell you that you have a right to consult with an attorney and you don't have to talk to me?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you actually think about it and say, yeah, I don't think I want to talk? And I walked away, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then did you decide later that you still wanted to talk to me?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do?
I asked to speak to the DA.
And I came back in, correct?
Yes,
At your
ma'am.
request.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I once again advise you that you had a right to an attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the defense asked you questions about you wanted a deal, you wanted to see your girls. It's true. You wanted to see your girls, right?
That is still true today.
And when you say girls, do you mean your wife and your daughter?
And grandma that we take care of.
Okay, she lived with you?
Yes.
So at that moment, you wanted to see your girls. You actually asked, can I see them? Can I FaceTime them? Can I talk to them? You asked all those questions, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, anytime did myself or the detectives, anybody ever offer you or suggest you're going to get any deal at all, and we're talking about in Washington, to testify?
No. Quite the contrary. You actually couldn't even guarantee that I was going to be able to see my wife.
That's what you were told by me and the detectives, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, you asked me, am I going to be charged? Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And all these requests is after you'd already interviewed with the detectives and given your whole statement. This is kind of the tail end when the day's almost over, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you'd already talked to the detectives, you'd already given your statement, we're winding up, you asked to talk to me, and you wanted help seeing your girls, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you asked me, am I being charged, what did I tell you?
You said you are.
And when you asked me, am I going to have to go to Los Angeles, what did I tell you?
You said yes.
Did I ever offer you anything?
No, ma'am.
Did I ever talk about plea deals with you?
No, ma'am.
Did I ever suggest you're going to get leniency?
No, ma'am.
And did the detectives or myself ever bring up, we need you to testify against Monica and tell us all this stuff about Monica?
No, ma'am.
So when you came back to, one second. You went back then once again after this. You were put back in again. You went back and forth a lot, but you were put back in again with the undercover agent. Do you remember that?
I do now. Yeah.
You went back and forth. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes.
But before you actually ended up speaking to me, did you talk to the agent about speaking to me? If you remember.
I believe I believe I did.
Okay. When you're put back in with the Perkins agent, or the undercover agent, once again, you talked to him once again about the defendant. And you said to him, this is 152 of the Perkins transcript, line 16. But I don't know if they have anything on her except for what he told me she said. Like, so I believe she set the whole thing up. The PA said, You said, that's what I believe. And the undercover agent, I use the word PA, Perkins agent, but it's undercover agent, said to you, but you said something about insurance money. And once again, you talked about insurance, and you said, that's what it was mentioned, but I didn't really think about it. Do you remember that conversation?
Yes, ma'am.
So, contrary to the questions on cross-examination, you did talk about the defendant multiple times, both in the undercover operation and with the detectives in Washington, the day you were arrested, that you believe the defendant was involved in setting up the murder of her husband.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And you also talked to them about the insurance money. That's the day you're arrested, about knowing that she was going to collect insurance money. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, when you were put back in the cell with the undercover agent, I'm sorry, this is with when you interviewed with me, I'm sorry. I asked you, and this is page 152 of the interview, line 1. I asked you, did you think he just wanted to beat him up? And you said, that's what I was thinking. Well, that's not true though now, right?
No, that's not true.
That's what you were saying in the interview. And were you minimizing the whole planning and premeditation of this?
Yes.
And then I asked you, but then you knew about the insurance money, so how does that factor in? And you started to talk, and I talked over you, and I said, because you're not going to get insurance. And I had not finished my sentence. And you said, I knew what I was told, whether it was true or not. And I said, okay. You started to say, I don't, and then I responded, so when did the conversation about the insurance money come in? And you said, maybe a few weeks before. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
So I know you've been asked a lot of questions about when you knew about the insurance money. Before you flew to Los Angeles, had the topic of insurance money come up before in your conversations with Baker?
Yes, ma'am.
And that the defendant was to receive insurance money?
Yes, ma'am.
And in fact, Baker had told you that some of that money would be payment to you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And when the defense asked you about your financial situation at the time, did you have a lot of money? Did you need money?
I didn't have a lot of money.
But was this for the money?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you agree to commit the murder just for the money?
I did what Baker asked me to. Yeah. He said, I need you so we can get this money.
And Baker didn't stand to inherit insurance money.
No.
He told you the defendant was getting the insurance money.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. A few questions about some specific things. We talked a lot about the timing of things. Again, as you responded to the defense attorney, were you wearing a watch during any of your days in Los Angeles, January 22nd, 23rd?
No, ma'am.
Was the time, the actual physical time, whether it be 2 o'clock, noon, 3 o'clock, was any of that important to you?
No, ma'am.
Was anything scheduled for at 2 o'clock we will go here, at 3 o'clock we will go there?
No, ma'am.
Are you doing your best to recall the times that these things occurred now 7 years later, 8 years later?
Yes, ma'am.
The day that you came in on the 22nd and you went to, you flew in on the 22nd and then you ultimately ended up in that parking lot where the pho restaurant was, and you decided that you couldn't do it. You don't know what time you got there?
Not really. It was dark.
It was dark. Now, on the way there, do you remember anything from the apartment, leaving the apartment, to going to that location? Do you remember what you did in between the apartment and the location?
Sat in the front seat and rode.
Okay. Did you stop anywhere? Did you stop at a Ralph's?
I don't remember. I remember pulling up in the back of the strip mall.
Do you remember any stops on the way to whether it be to get money, to go to a Ralph's, to get a Starbucks, anything? Do you remember anything?
No.
Do you know how much time from when you left Baker's apartment until you went to that area? Do you know how much time passed?
No.
Okay. Could it have been anywhere? I mean, if you don't remember, you don't remember if it's hours or minutes?
I mean, it was minutes. It wasn't that far of a ride, but I don't know how long.
Now, where was Baker before you decided to go to this location?
I think he was in the apartment with me.
Do you know for sure?
No.
Okay, so is it fair you don't know where Baker was before you took that trip to the location where you had planned on the 22nd to stab Fabio?
Where the plan was?
I'm saying you don't know where Baker was earlier that day.
No.
Okay. And on a side note, the term Baker referred to the victim, Fabio, as motherfucker, that wasn't your term, right?
No.
You weren't calling Fabio motherfucker, that was Baker calling him motherfucker.
That is correct.
Okay. As far as those three-way calls that you had with Birdsong and Baker, the month December and the months October, November, December, those months previous, you never said with certainty that Monica was on any of those calls, right?
Right.
So your testimony is you know Baker was on it, you know Birdsong was on it, you don't know if anybody else was on the call. Is that your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
And then also a lot of questions on this Vegas meeting, or not meeting, I should say. When you went to Vegas in July of 2016, you do not know, is this your testimony today, if you met the defendant there or not?
That is correct.
Now, do you agree that multiple times you said you don't believe you met her until you came to Los Angeles from that Las Vegas trip and went to the gym that day, July 2016, met her at the gym and went back to her house? That's what you believe is the first time you met her.
Yes.
Now, you've been asked, could you have met her in Vegas? Did you meet her in Vegas? When you're saying I might have, why are you saying I might have?
Vegas is a lot. And Baker introduced me to a lot of people at any given moment in time.
So you don't know, but you can't say one way or the other. It's possible, but you have no recollection of having met her before when you saw her at LA Fitness in July of 2016. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. When you were picked up from the airport on the 22nd, you testified with the defense counsel that you think you were in the Versailles Nisa, but you're not sure, right? When you were picked up from the airport.
Yes.
Did you know Rob to rent cars?
Yes.
How often did he rent cars? That you know?
Well, anytime one of his other ones wasn't either. I remember one wasn't registered and one wasn't working, and he still needed to get around, so he would go get a rental for a few hours. So it wasn't uncommon that he wouldn't go grab one and then drop it off later that day.
When you went to Vegas in 2016, did you rent a car then?
No.
Did you ever go anywhere with Rob other than on any other trips where he rented a car?
Just in LA.
Okay. So it wasn't unusual that Baker had rental cars.
No, it was not.
You do know that that Nissan Versa is the car that you were driving when you got stopped by the police for the seatbelt ticket, though. You know that you were in the Versa then.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Couple more questions. Just when you got to the house the day that you were going to actually go through with the stabbing of Fabio, and this is on the 23rd, did Rob tell you where or how he knew where Fabio, the victim, would be?
Yeah, he told me that she left him home alone. We have to go now. I remember slightly hesitating. He was like, "Put this on," and it was never really a threat with him. It was always just a certain look. I was like, "All right," and I just did it. And then as we jogged up the hill and we got closer to the door, he turned back and looked at me and said he should be on the patio.
Did he say how he knew that he should be on the patio?
He told me that before we left, he said that she left him home alone and he should be on the patio. He reminded me of that.
And in your proffer statement that you did with the prosecution and the detectives, do you recall telling the people, us in the room then, that he told you that she said he was on the patio?
Yes.
And then again, was there a plan? I know, briefly going over this, the plan to take the car. I asked you about the keys the other day. Did he ever say anything to you about the keys?
He said she's going to leave the keys somewhere where he can find them.
That she is going to leave the keys somewhere?
Yes.
And in your proffer on day 2, did you tell, again, the detectives and the prosecution in that same statement back in November of 2024 that Baker told you that she was going to leave the keys out?
Yes.
Exhibit 247 was the agreement between the people and Christopher Austin. It's already been entered in. Remember, we talked to you about this yesterday, that agreement that you signed stating that kind of the terms of the agreement is to tell the truth. If you don't tell the truth and the court decides you haven't been truthful in your testimony and upheld your own regarding the deal is off, basically. The deal can't be off. You understand that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, this paragraph here on page 3, Christopher Austin understands that he is under no obligation to make any particular statement or to testify in conformity with any prior statements he may have made. Christopher Austin further understands that his only obligation in this entire matter is to be completely honest and truthful. Have you abided by this?
Yes, ma'am.
So that means that whatever you said before, we're not asking you, did you understand this to mean that we're not saying, no one's saying you have to testify how you stated before. It's in here right now that matters.
Yes, ma'am.
And have you told the truth, the best that you recall?
Yes, ma'am.
Also, you pled then, if I may mark the plea transcript, it is 10 pages in length, plea transcript for Christopher Austin, dated January 17th, 2025.
It's 254?
254. Is it right? And in that plea transcript, page 2, in this courtroom, and that's Ms. Silverman talking, the defendant will be entering a plea to count 1 as a second-degree murder. He will be admitting to the personal use of a knife pursuant to Penal Code Section 12022B1 and the people would ask that sentencing be put over until after the jury trial. Do you understand that to mean that after you testify and after it's determined that you testified truthfully, then you would be sentenced to the agreed upon terms? Did you
Yes,
understand
ma'am.
that?
Yes, ma'am.
And furthermore, Ms. Silverman advised you, and the other thing that I want to put on the record is that when the defendant testifies at trial, this plea agreement is contingent upon his truthful and complete testimony at trial. However, it is not the people or the district attorney's office who are the arbiters of whether or not he testifies truthfully. It is the court. And I want to make sure that he understands that. And so he's not being asked to testify in a way that he thinks that the district attorney would want, but that he testifies truthfully and that the decision is ultimately in the discretion of this court. She asked you, do you understand what was said, Mr. Austin? You said, yes, sir. The court asked you that, I'm sorry. And the court asked you, is this agreeable to you? And you said yes. Did you understand this at the time?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you abided by this in court and testified truthfully, not what anything you think the DA wants to hear?
Yes, ma'am.
By the way, you will be sentenced if you get the agreement to 16 years to life in prison, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that 16 to life means you have no ending right now? You understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. This is irrelevant at this point.
It's basically a cross-examination, like getting home to his girls. It's overruled.
So that means after you serve 16 years, that's your first opportunity to go in front of a parole board. And it's up to them to determine if you get out. They might say yes, they might say no, right? You don't know.
That is correct.
So when the defense attorney asked you about getting a deal, do you think this is a deal?
No. I mean, yes. No. I don't know. I'm not going home. I'm not going to get to work with my youth anymore.
So no one ever told you, if you plead, you're going home to see your girls, right?
That is correct.
And what you testified today has been the truth?
That's yes, ma'am.
And yesterday?
Yes, ma'am.
And let me ask you, would you have committed this murder, killing of Fabio Sementilli, if you didn't think that the defendant, his wife, wanted this?
Objection, that's speculation.
Sustained.
No more questions.
Anything for us?
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Austin,
Yes, sir.
you know Mr. Baker was sentenced to life without parole.
I was informed.
And that's what you were facing before you made this, we'll be generous and call it plea agreement, not deal.
Objection assumes facts, not in evidence.
To overrule?
Your Honor, he wasn't charged with this.
I'm sorry, I'm not listening to you. You don't understand on this.
Well, I would object to a legal conclusion.
So the complaint was murder with special circumstances.
No.
I stand corrected. Sustained.
Mr. Austin, if you don't testify the way the prosecution wants you to testify, well, let me go back. You got this deal or offer only after your proffer with your attorney, right? Thank you, sir. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you knew the deal was based on what you said at the proffer, correct?
To say I knew, I don't think that's fair.
Is that fair?
No, I don't think that's fair. To say I knew. I didn't
Your
know anything.
attorney did not inform you what the reason was for the proffer?
He did inform me that what a proffer was. He did inform me that in going into the proffer, I have to tell the whole entire truth of everything that I know to the best of my ability.
In other
And I
words,
did that.
confessing to the murder, right?
Yes.
Well, why would you just confess to the murder if you're facing life imprisonment?
I was unaware of that I was actually facing life in prison.
Your attorney didn't tell you what you were facing when you were charged with first-degree murder at the use of a knife? He didn't tell you what the penalty was?
Correct.
Thank you.
Did he tell you what you were facing? What penalty?
Yes.
And what did he tell you?
He gave me a list of 3 to 4 potentials that the state of California could charge me with. So to say I knew what I was facing entirely, no, I did not. But I knew it was going to be a very high number.
Worse than 16 years to life, right?
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, why go through and make the deal? Right?
Right.
You had to gain something from the deal, right?
Correct.
And you knew what you had said to the officer, to the DA, and the Perkins individual down up in Vancouver wasn't good enough for the deal, for you to get your deal, right?
Again, I don't think it's fair to say that I knew what was good enough.
You didn't know that the one thing that was missing from your statement in Vancouver was connecting Monica Sementilli to the crime?
They interviewed me a few questions, but I withheld information.
Pardon?
I withheld information until I got an attorney present.
What information did you withhold?
Counsel, stay.
When you were put in the Perkins cell, I'll call it the Perkins cell, you know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Who's the first person who brought up the bitch or Monica or anyone of that nature, meaning Baker's girlfriend, who you now say was involved with this? Who brought that up first? Do you remember that?
The detective brought it up to me, and the individual, the young man, if you will, started asking me questions about it, and I brought it up to him.
What young man?
The young man in the cell.
Oh, right. Okay. You remember him saying, that's fixed to go to trial. That's why you here, because the bitch is fixed to go up for trial and try to make shit better for herself, threw you under the bus. Remember that?
He said that.
He brought up a bitch or someone throwing you under the bus. Not you. Right?
That I brought it up. He brought it up.
How did you bring it? Who brought it up first?
The detective?
The detective? Before you were put into the cell?
No one brought up anything before I was put into the cell.
So what do you mean by the detective? The Perkins individual?
No, the detective that came to see me and showed me pictures.
And when was that in relation to when you were arrested?
When he came, opened the door and showed me the pictures. I think if I remember correctly, the first time I didn't really want to talk to anybody.
Okay, let me get this straight, if we could, time-wise. You are arrested in Vancouver, Washington, correct?
Yes, sir.
What day are you arrested? This is not something we...
I understand that. You're trying to find out when the detective
Yes.
appeared. Okay, there's been a testimony. Now, while you inquire, but there's been testimony the detective appeared at the cell in the presence of the Perkins agent.
Okay. You've heard what His Honor just said?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
It better be.
Yes, sir.
So, the first person to bring up that there was another person involved besides you and Baker was the detective, right?
Yes, sir.
And what did he say, as best you recall?
He said, man, I don't want to misquote that, man. That's not fair.
Well, he basically said, the reason you're here is that you can call her a bitch, I'm sure, is that someone else is involved, Baker's girlfriend or something like that, and we got to find out who it is.
So ruled.
Isn't that the gist of what he told you?
Well, objection assumes facts, not evidence.
It's overruled.
He let me know that she knew we were all involved in some way, shape, or form.
She let you know that
He let me know
He let you know that. What?
that we were all involved in some way, shape, or form.
Who did he mean? Did you ask him who he meant by we?
Didn't have to. He said names.
What did he say?
He said Baker and the defendant.
He
And
called
you.
her the defendant?
No, sir. He called
What
her
did he
Monica.
say?
He said Monica.
So he came to you and said, we already know that who's involved, and it's you and Baker and Monica, correct?
I don't want to misquote him, so yeah.
Something like that.
Something in that form.
He informed you why you were there.
Yes, sir.
And then the Perkins guy said, man, that bitch done sold you out. Did she sell you out as far as you know? You know what sell out means?
Objection is
It's form sustained.
What did you take it when he said, that bitch done sold you out, now this is your turn? Words to that effect.
I didn't take it as anything because I knew why I was there.
You knew why you were there from the moment the detective said, we know what happened, and it involved Monica, you, and Baker, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And then he leaves you alone with the Perkins guy, right?
That is correct.
And you tell did you lie to the Perkins guy?
Yeah.
What'd you lie about?
objection, cumulative.
Sustained.
Well, why would you lie to the Perkins guy if the detective just told you that the 3 people were involved and you knew he was right?
Objection, cumulative.
Sustained.
And you told the Perkins guy, because he kept saying to you, the bitch did it for the insurance, she did it for the insurance, you gotta come clean, you gotta help yourself. I mean, we went through all those things yesterday, remember?
Objection states the testimony.
So ruled.
All that stuff about you gotta make a deal, and you saying I'll do whatever I have to, and him saying you better make a deal, go after the bitch, and you saying I'll do what I have to. Remember all that from yesterday?
Yes, sir.
And then he asked you, so when did you find out the bitch did it for the insurance? Remember what you said?
No.
The day of the incident.
Oh,
Right?
the day it happened.
The day of
I remember what I told him now.
I'm sorry, what?
I remember what I told him now. My apologies.
Okay. Was that the truth?
No, it was not.
Well, why did you lie to him?
Objection, cumulative.
Sustained.
And then, the other thing you said to the Perkins people and to the detective and to the officers here, when you knew what they wanted and you knew what it would take to get you out, you said the only reason we went up there to begin with was to rough him up. Remember that?
Objection, cumulative.
Sustained. I think our adjournment this time. We will not be in session this afternoon. You're free to do whatever you choose. We will next be in session tomorrow at 9 o'clock. The admin advice, and I'll discuss this case among yourselves. With anyone else who wants to express any opinions of the cause, I submit it to you. Have a good evening.
It's my understanding that, based on the questioning, yesterday, that, well, let me ask you this. You said you didn't want to testify or go into issues or information about Monica Sementilli until you had a lawyer. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So as we went through yesterday, and I'm not going to go through all the conversations you had with the Perkins people and with the officers, every time you were asked about being paid or who else was involved, you didn't lay out Monica Sementilli as someone who was involved in the murder and was going to get insurance money. You didn't say that at the time, did you?
In what process?
No, when you were talking to the Perkins person and initially when you were talking to the detectives.
It's my understanding that I believe I did say that.
Okay, and it was after they told you who was involved, and one of them was Monica Sementilli, is that right?
Objection made.
Isn't that right?
They asked. They didn't tell me anything.
They came up to you.
And I said yes.
First thing that was told to you by anyone after you were arrested was that there were 3 people involved. They knew 2 of them, and they were going after the 3rd, and they gave you her name, Monica, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the first time you'd heard the word Monica Sementilli?
The last name? Yes. The first name? No.
You didn't even know her last name, did you?
No.
So you knew at that point that the reason you were there was to give them information about Monica Sementilli's involvement in the murder. Is that right?
I knew I was there because there was a fugitive warrant out for my arrest.
Okay. But I mean, the contacts you had with the Perkins individual and with the police officers all involved your confession to committing the murder. We went through that, right?
Yes, sir.
And the next thing they were interested in is who was doing it with you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, then, and you told them everything about the murder, about Baker, about going there, flying down, and all the rest, but you didn't tell them about Monica Sementilli, did you?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
In fact, you said you didn't want to do that. You didn't want to bring in Monica or insurance or anything like that until you had a lawyer, right?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
Did you have a lawyer down in, up in Vancouver?
Objection cumulative.
You went over that. Sustained.
Who was your lawyer in Vancouver?
Objection relevance.
So rule.
I don't know her. I can't remember her name.
You specifically asked the district attorney's office, you asked the police officers in Vancouver if you could meet with Heather Stagel, the prosecutor who had flown up, correct?
I requested to meet with the DA. I did not know who she was.
They told you a DA had flown all the way up there, right?
They told me a DA was present.
And had come from Los Angeles, correct?
They did not tell me they came from Los Angeles.
They told you she was from Vancouver?
Objection relevance.
So rule.
Mr. Austin?
Yes, sir.
Where did they tell you she was from?
They did not tell me where she was from.
Right. And you spoke with her and asked her, are you going to ask me to testify, correct?
I'm now confused. Spoke to who?
Detective, Deputy District Attorney Stagel. You met with her up in Vancouver, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you asked her if she was going to ask you to testify, right?
Is that what I said?
I got a transcript here which says, Austin, are you going to ask me to testify, DA Heather?
Can you be paid in line, please?
This is page 137, lines 21 to 33.
37. There is no page 36.
137, lines 21 to 33.
There is no 21 to 33.
21 to 23, I'm sorry. You specifically discussed with D.A. Heather, as you called her. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
How'd you know her name was Heather?
Well, manners will take you further than money will, so I asked what her name was.
She told you.
Yes.
You discussed with her the possibility of a deal and the possibility of your testimony against Monica Sementilli as part of that deal as early as the time of your arrest in Vancouver on October 2nd. Isn't that right?
That's what I requested.
That's what it says, you said. Does that ring the bell?
Yes, sir.
You said, are you going to ask me to test?
That was improper. That's correct. Sustained.
You want to see your... Let's read that to yourself. All the way down here.
Can I see that? Because it's like the transcript. Oh, yes, like the transcript. Can you show me this? What did you show him?
21 to 30.
It's fine.
Okay. Mr. Austin,
Yes, sir.
would you read that over? Please, to yourself. And then when you're done, to the top of the next page. See that?
Yes, sir.
Does that refresh your memory as to what you said?
Yes, sir.
And what you said was, are you going to ask me to testify, D.A. Heather?
Objection, his memory was refreshed.
Sustained.
Well, after refreshing your memory, do you recall saying what you read there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what'd you say?
I asked her if she wants me to testify.
You said, are you going to ask me to testify, D.A. Heather? And she said, I don't know yet. What is your feeling on that? I think I know. And you say, if I can talk. And she said, you've already told me I know. You said, if I can talk to an attorney and that attorney can talk to you, we can work out some type. And she said, that's how it works. You said, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm looking for some type of deal to go home to my girls, right?
Yes, sir.
And she said, right, I understand. And you said, I don't know what to do, but if you need me to do something so I can go home to my girls, whatever you need, I'm being
One moment.
accused of.
I'm sorry. One moment.
I didn't know who you were saying one moment.
I don't know where you're reading from.
It's still page 137, line 21 to 30.
You're going to jump lines. And what line are you on now? It's not the transcript, so I don't know. So we're not on page 138, but we're not on 143. Page 143.
Lines 4 through 7.
object to reading
143
this.
lines 4 through 7.
I'm objecting to reading this.
Well, do you recall what saying to her about what you need to testify to if you can go home to your girls? Do you remember saying that?
I remember being in that emotional state, yes.
Well, I know you were in that emotional state. Your emotional state was you would say anything you had to be able to go home and see your girls, right?
I didn't say anything. I told her the truth when I got my attorney present.
Okay, so, but you asked to see Miss Stagel, remember?
Yes.
This was after you said you testified yesterday that you didn't want to work out any deal unless your attorney was present, right?
Yes.
You knew Miss Stagel was an attorney from the DA's office, correct?
She informed me of that.
Pardon?
She informed me of that, yes.
Well, you knew that beforehand. They told you that a DA had come down and flown up from LA and was here in Vancouver, right?
Yes, sir.
So if you were going to wait till you got to LA and meet with an attorney before you worked out any deal, why did you ask to see Miss Stagel?
Because I wanted to know who the DA was.
Okay, so you met her, right?
Yes.
And then she talked about being honest, correct?
Yes.
And everything you said had to be honest?
Yes.
And that's when you told her you would, I don't know what to do, but if you need me to do something so I can go home to my girls, whatever you need, I'm being accused of, I need to get home to my girls, correct?
Yes.
So you meant that, didn't you?
Yes.
Whatever they needed, you were going to tell them, right?
Yes.
You just didn't want to tell them right then and there.
I didn't tell him everything. That is correct.
Pardon?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. You waited till you got up to, or down to Los Angeles, correct?
Yes.
And then you met with Mr. Aval, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, before you left Vancouver and went down and talked to Mr. Aval, you told Heather, I think this is on transcript page 83, lines 22 to 23, and 84, lines 1 to 2.
Object to reading something.
I'm just telling the prosecutor the lines.
What was the question?
Question is, did you tell Heather that you wanted to talk to her because you understood everything depends on her?
What page, counsel?
Page 83, lines 22 to 23. Line 84, lines 1 to 2. Shortly after that, you say,
Your question?
Can you repeat the question, please, sir?
you ask if you can have an attorney for the talk with her, and Heather says, when you say that you want an attorney present, then I can't talk to you. Right?
Yes.
And she says, I'm not asking, you may not remember everything, so if he's talking about insurance money related to Baker or collected a few weeks before, now you may not have thought you would ultimately be involved, but you knew Rob wanted to do something for you. Is that true? Remember that question?
Yes, sir.
And you said not
So
no.
what page that you're reading from the document?
153.
Hold on a second.
You understand when I say Heather, that's what you were saying.
Objection seems like on the head of us.
You called her Heather, right? Not Miss Daigle.
Yes.
Because that was her name, you found out, and you were being polite. So when she asked if you were talking about insurance money, referring to Blake Baker, that you may not have thought you would ultimately be involved, but you knew Rob wanted to do something. Is that true? You said no, not necessarily, right?
Yes, sir.
And she asked you, you said, I knew what we talked about. She asked you, what'd you talk about? And you said, just to go in, rough him up. You know what I'm saying? You remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then there's a whole section where Miss Stagel says, well,
Objection. This is cumulative.
I haven't heard the question. I'll take the objection or submission.
you're getting questioned after that about if you're just there to rough him up, how are you going to get insurance money from roughing him up? He's still going to be alive. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
And what'd you say?
I don't remember what I said.
You said that's the way you understood it. You were just there to rough him up, and then it changed when you got up there. Isn't that right? That's what you told him.
Yes.
Was that the truth?
No, it was not.
So you asked to see Miss Stagel. She told you you had to tell the truth. You told her that, and it wasn't the truth?
Yes, sir.
Why did you lie to her?
Because I didn't have an attorney present to give me proper counsel.
Well, then why say anything? You're the one who asked to speak to her.
I don't know. Emotions.
What?
My emotions.
You wanted to get home, correct?
I still want to get home.
I understand that. I don't blame you. But when you were up there in October, everything in your mind in talking to the Perkins individual and to the police and to Miss Stagel, you said over and over again, I just want to get home. I want to see my daughter. I'll tell you whatever you want. I just need to get home. Isn't that what you were saying throughout your stay up there in Vancouver?
Yes, sir.
And then you had Miss Stagel come up to meet with you so you could tell her what you wanted to hear so you could go home that day, right? That was your hope.
Yes, sir.
And when she asked you, okay, be honest, tell me what happened, you said we were just going up there to rough him up, correct?
Yes, sir.
Why'd you lie about that when she was basically telling you, all right, tell me the truth. You had me come up here, you want to go home, what happened?
I needed proper counsel, and I didn't have it.
You didn't consider that proper counsel when you asked for her and she asked you to say what happened?
I didn't think she was going to ask me a whole bunch of detail.
You did think she was going to ask you a whole bunch of detail.
No, sir, I did not.
Why did that concern you?
I was on my way to work, and then I got pulled over. So
Yes.
there's a lot going on in my mind at that time.
But once you sat down there and spent 5 or 6 hours in the cell with the Perkins person, you pretty much knew why you were there, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
For
sir.
5 or 6 hours, the Perkins individual was basically telling you, you got to get them what they want. You got to tell them about Monica, using her name. You got to do whatever you can to get yourself out there. First one in, first one out. Right?
That's what he said.
Okay. Do you believe him?
Shaky.
Okay. But you wanted to find out, right? If he was right. That's why you called for Miss Stagel, the DA, to talk to her,
No.
right?
No.
Why'd you call Miss Stagel?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Then you asked Ms. Stagel, you specifically discussed with her the possibility of a deal and possibility of your testimony against Monica Sementilli as part of that deal, right?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence.
It's a question.
What
Overruled.
page are you on now?
137, lines 21 to 33. Do you remember discussing that with her, the possibility of a deal if you testify against Monica Sementilli?
Yes, sir.
Remember what she said?
That's not how this works.
Well, you asked, are you going to ask me to testify, D.A. Heather? And she said, I don't know yet. What is your feeling on that? I think.
Objection cumulative.
It is.
And you say if I can talk to her.
Objection cumulative.
I have heard that there's no question pending when you start with and.
You said if I can talk to an attorney and that attorney can talk to you, we can work out some type of. Right?
We went over that minutes ago, counsel. Let's move on.
And she said that's how it works.
Again, we went over that minutes ago. Let's move on.
So you are transferred up to, or down to Los Angeles. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And first you meet with an attorney that is provided for you. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you meet with the DA, correct? Two DAs, Ms. Silverman and Ms. Stagel.
No, sir.
Who do you meet with?
No one.
Well, you met with your lawyer, correct?
The appointed lawyer?
Yes, Mr. Aval, who is here in court.
After the arraignment. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, you
I'm
had
trying to follow you, so right
Okay.
now I'm a little.
That's fine, that's fine.
I hit a stop sign.
Okay. We've got time. The judge will stop me if I go too far. You were flown down to L.A., right?
Yes, sir.
And you were housed down here in custody, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then within a few days, you met Mr. Aval.
Yes,
Let
sir.
me change that. First, you went to court. They told you what you were charged with. You enter a plea of not guilty, as everyone does initially. You get an attorney, and then you finally are able, after other attorneys are involved, you're finally able to meet with Mr. Aval.
Yes, sir.
And you discuss with Mr. Aval what your options are, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your options are either you can cooperate and get a deal, or you can plead not guilty and go to trial, correct?
Objection.
That-
Going into Mr. Aval, attorney-client privilege.
As far as the options, I think that was already testified to, and I'll allow that.
I'm talking about your state of mind on all these questions, whatever they are, and I'll try to make them as short as possible. I'm talking about what your state of mind was in meeting, after meeting with Mr. Aval and going and sitting down for the proffer, okay? Got it?
Okay.
And your state of mind was at that time that you had two choices. You could either fight the case or make a deal, correct?
Objection is cumulative.
Yes. Proceed. It is.
And you decided to make a deal if you could, correct?
I was advised by my counsel after he explained to me what a proffer agreement was.
Okay. And without going into that in too much detail, a proffer is when they ask you questions and you give them answers, right?
Yes, sir.
And if they're satisfied that those answers are the truth and are valuable to you, to them, if the answers are valuable to them and they can use them in their prosecution, then they may come back and make you an offer, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's totally up to them. You understood that?
Yes, sir.
When you understood, it wasn't just that they were asking you to tell the truth, they were asking you to give them information against Monica Sementilli that they did not have, correct?
That is not correct.
Well, everything that you had said up in Vancouver had been a confession to the murder that you committed and Mr. Baker committed, correct?
Yes, sir.
You were already clear about that. You had told that to Perkins, to the DA, to everyone, to the police and everyone, right?
Yes, sir.
That the one thing you hadn't told them is that the third person was Monica Sementilli or anything about insurance money.
It's my understanding. I believe I brought up the insurance money in Vancouver.
After they told you that the third person they had or needed was Monica Sementilli, she was being tried, the other two were caught, meaning you and Baker. They told you all that and her name before you said anything about insurance, isn't that right?
They didn't tell me her. They
didn't
didn't tell me
tell-
they needed her.
I'm
They didn't
sorry?
say that. They didn't mention that at all.
They didn't mention that at all? They didn't
They didn't
mention
mention. They didn't mention the word need.
Well, they told you who her name was, right?
They told me what her name was.
They told you, this is line, transcript, page 92, lines 23, 25,
Which transcript?
October 2nd.
I know. Which one?
There's only one October 2nd.
There's two? Was it the Perkins or was it the interview?
I believe it was the interview with Heather, with you, with Ms. Stagel. 92?
And what else?
92, lines 23 to 25, and page 93,
Okay.
top.
Sure.
Okay. And Ms. Stagel tells you, with that said again, I'm real careful because I can't make any promises. But I'm also telling you that we want to be fair to you. We can get all the information, you know.
One
have a-
moment. It will be missing part in the middle.
Mr. Austin,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to come forward here and see if I can refresh your memory. It's been well, in your case, it's been a couple of years perhaps.
I'm going to object on refreshing. I don't know what we're refreshing.
I don't know either. Is there something you don't remember, Mr. Austin?
Do you,
There was a good question.
Mr. Austin, let me ask the question then and see if you remember. Do you remember Ms. Stagel talking to you about what's going to happen if you come down to Los Angeles and what they want from you?
I remember her saying something along the lines of, "You're gonna have to be extradited first."
Okay? But my question to you was, if you remember, is did they tell you they had Monica Sementilli and she's the one they wanted you to testify about? That they already knew about you and Baker?
I was informed that she was going to trial.
Okay.
So, to my knowledge, that meant she was either already in custody or out.
And they told you you wouldn't be you, where you were sitting there, without Monica.
Excuse me?
They told you you wouldn't be you without Monica. You know what that means?
What do you mean?
There wouldn't be a you without Monica, so we believe you that you got brought into this. We do believe you. That's what they said to you, right?
Yes.
I think everyone believes you. This is what you intended.
Hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. Did they tell you they already had an understanding and the truth, what you've already told about your role to the detectives, right?
Yes, sir.
But what they didn't have in your mind was information about Monica Sementilli, insurance, or anything else related to that. You knew that's what your bargaining chip was going to be to get your deal when you came to Los Angeles. Isn't that right?
That is not right.
Well, why did you want to come to Los Angeles then after speaking to everyone in Vancouver?
Objection. Assumes facts on it.
Sustained.
You come to Los Angeles then, and you realize, Mr. Austin, that at the time you came to Los Angeles, you had already confessed to killing Fabio Sementilli, correct?
Yes, sir.
You had confessed to doing it in a plan with Mr. Baker and Mr. Birdsong, correct?
I don't think I recall confessing any plan.
You didn't discuss any plans?
Not in full detail. I don't believe I did.
Why not? Let me answer that for you if I can, because you wanted a deal first.
Objection, no question pending.
Sustained.
Did you want a deal first with your attorney in Los Angeles before you would give them any details, including the involvement of Monica Sementilli? Isn't that a true statement?
I wanted to go home. There was no guarantee that a deal was even going to be allowed after what I said.
Correct. But you wanted to go home from Vancouver, correct? Originally.
I wanted to go home, period.
Okay. And did they send you home from Vancouver?
No, sir.
And you said you didn't tell them the whole truth in Vancouver because you didn't have an attorney, right?
Yes, sir.
And you needed the attorney to make a deal so you could go home in exchange for your information, correct?
I was hopeful that an attorney would give me proper counsel on how to deal with the situation based on what I put myself into and what I got dragged into.
Based on what you have been dragged into, which was the murder of Fabio Sementilli. Right? Am I wrong?
Yes, sir.
I'm wrong or right?
That is correct, sir. You're
That
right.
is correct. And it was after, over and over and over again, in talking to the Perkins person and to the police, that it was, you've got to make a deal. If you don't make a deal, you've got to give him that bitch. If you don't give him that bitch, you ain't going to see your child again. Isn't that what you were told by someone you thought was another inmate but turned out to be an officer? Isn't that what he told you?
That's what he said.
And over again, without going through it, you said, I'm going to give them whatever they want. Just tell me what you need and I'll give it to you. Didn't you say that over and over again?
Objection is to discuss the evidence and the state's testimony.
So ordered on those grounds.
Mr. Austin?
Yes, sir.
Did you mean it? That you were going to give them whatever they needed to get out of there and get home?
When I said that, I meant I was going to give them the truth of everything that I knew that I could recall from that day.
Okay, but you weren't telling the truth you're saying and recalling anything while you were up there.
No.
Counsel.
Okay.
Court.
So, all that depended on your attorney down here, correct?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
So you meet with Mr. Aval and you have the proffer, correct?
Objection cumulative.
I'll allow that.
Yes, sir.
And they tell you, I think it was Miss Silverman, that they're not obligated to do anything for you until they hear what you say and evaluate what you say, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they tell you it has got to be valuable to them. They've got to be able to use it in their case, or it's not valuable to them and you're not going to get any deal, right?
That was no guarantee that anything that I had to say was going to be valuable at all. I told them the truth.
But you knew it had to be valuable. They told you that, right? You want me to quote from?
That's what was said, I believe. Yes.
Okay. What did you think it meant when they said, what you tell us has to be valuable to our case?
Is that the question?
Yes. What was going through your mind with your attorney there? Whatever conversations you had, I don't want the details, but what did it mean to you, after discussing it with your attorney, that what you gave them had to be valuable to their case, beyond what you'd already said? You'd already confessed to the murder and copped out on Baker. So what do you think they needed that was valuable?
They needed me to go back as far as my memory would allow me to and remember any details and tell them what I could remember
About Monica.
about the entire situation.
Well, you had already discussed the entire situation with them down up in Vancouver, right?
No, sir, I did not.
Sustained.
You were told by Miss Stagel, because we know we've got one other person to try, and that's Monica. And you know, there wouldn't be you without Monica.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
And then they began asking you questions, right?
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you were answering those questions, right?
Yes, sir.
They asked you about gold coins. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
Remember what you told them?
I,
Well, I'm just asking now if you remember what he told them.
I was given a roll of gold coins.
All right. Was that the truth?
Yes.
Okay. You remember where they came from?
Yes, sir.
Where'd they come from?
Baker handed them to me when he dropped me off at the bus station.
Okay. Have you ever seen him with the gold coins before?
No.
Okay. So you don't know if he got them from Fabio's house or anywhere else, do you?
I know what I was told.
You know what you were told?
Yes, sir.
By who?
By Baker.
When did he tell you that?
When he put the coins in my pocket, he said, "Tell him you got them from me. If anybody asks, tell him you got them from me. They're from the safe."
Okay, well, I want you to read what you said here on page 172 to refresh your memory before I impeach him. I think that's the proper...
No?
I'm going to object to that.
He doesn't need memory refreshed. You want?
Oh, okay. Didn't you tell... Thank you, Honor. Didn't you tell them... I don't know where they came from. Question, so you don't know where they came from? Answer, no, I don't. Question, have you ever seen him with gold coins before? Because that's kind of an odd thing to be making payments in. You said no. Okay, so you don't know if he got them from Fabio's house. You say, but now that you're saying it, maybe, yeah, probably got them from Fabio's house and I was wrong. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
So, did they remind you that maybe you got them from Fabio's house?
I think they was encouraging me to tell them.
Pardon?
I think they was encouraging me to tell them the full truth.
The prosecutors were encouraging you to tell them.
The truth.
Well, they didn't say the truth. They just told you maybe you got them from the house. Isn't it true? And you said, I just remembered. Yeah, I did, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you just remember that you did?
No.
You didn't know before that question where you got the gold coins from?
I know what I was told to say, and during that time, I was still trying to regurgitate what I was told to say.
Okay.
But it's my understanding that I believe Baker got them from the safe.
And your understanding from who?
Baker got them from the safe.
How'd you know that?
He,
Objection to the order.
I'll allow this question.
when I got dropped off at the airport, he put coins in my pocket. And if anybody asked, tell them you got them from me. I had regurgitated that to tell them, but I had never actually seen Baker collect any gold coins. And then I had remembered that he said he's going to get her to leave the safe open, or she's going to leave the safe open, or he knew the code, something along those lines. And that's when I remembered that he more than likely got them from the safe. It was a roll of gold coins in a stack.
That's what you remember?
That's what I'm telling you.
Why didn't you tell it to them when they asked you originally, where did you get the gold coins
They
from?
were trying to get me there. Listen, that happened a long time ago.
Okay. You asked if you've ever seen him with gold coins before. That's an odd kind of way of making payments, and you said no. Right? Before that, you said you don't know where they came from. Then they say, so you don't know if he got them from the safe, from his house? And you say, but now that you're saying it, yeah, I probably got them from Fabio's house, and I was wrong. Remember that?
I told them I was wrong. Yes,
And you told them you were wrong because
I was wrong.
they were making it clear to you that just
I
saying you
was
got
wrong.
him from, hold on, just getting him from Baker wasn't enough. They wanted you to say it came from Fabio's house, and you told them that, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Now, previously you had said that there was no discussion of you getting any money until the day of the incident, right? Remember saying that?
Yes, sir.
Is that the truth?
No, sir.
Previously you had said that you had gone up there to rough him up. Was that the truth?
Counsel, we've been through it.
Do you remember when you were meeting with Miss Stagel in Vancouver? We're set to go to trial, and it's Monica. We're putting all together. You've added some information we may know, but we don't know for sure. We'll see the value that you've added. We'll see.
Objection.
You put it that way.
I'm sorry?
Hearsay and keyword.
Sustained?
You've added value, that goes a long way. Again, not a
Same
promise,
objection.
but it does.
Sustained.
Mr. Austin, let me go on to another few points here, okay? Did you previously say before your testimony today that the insurance came up in conversations with Baker prior to flying to LA, that you were to receive insurance money?
I knew
I'll allow this question.
it was going to be involved in some way, shape, or form.
Prior to leaving to go to LA. Right? Isn't that what you said?
Yes, sir.
That's when you were told about the possibility of getting some insurance money, correct?
He said some money, but yeah.
That's correct, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how long was it before you left for LA? Same day or on the flight or before or what?
What are you asking me?
Well, before you left for LA, you knew you were coming down to LA, right?
Yes, sir.
He told you that, what, a week before or 2 weeks before? It was your birthday?
He asked me to fly down on my birthday weekend.
Okay. And that's when he told you about the insurance money. Right? What I just read to you.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what you testified here and yesterday, that you found out then about the insurance money when you were flying down to LA.
So objection cumulative then.
Sustained.
And then you came to LA, and then, as you said, you were paid with the gold coins,
Objection
right?
cumulative.
It's just, did you ever get any other money from Mr. Baker?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you ever get anything else other than those gold coins?
I did.
You did? What?
A mental complex of suicidal ideation.
What?
A mental complex of suicidal ideation.
A mental complex to suicide ideation? I didn't understand.
I was suicidal after that.
And? Oh, you're saying that's what you got out of it?
Yeah, that's what I got out of it.
Okay. You testified to that yesterday, and you've told us how horrible you felt about all this. And you were going to commit suicide and all the rest, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Obviously, you didn't commit suicide. Obviously, you spent the money on the coins, and obviously, you never turned in your co-conspirators. You say we're your co-conspirators until you met with your lawyer here in Los Angeles. Isn't that right?
Sustained.
Do you remember something happening as you were driving up the driveway or running up the driveway to get to the Sementilli house? You remember that? Something about having to hurry?
I don't understand.
Okay, you run up that driveway, as we saw in the video, with your mask and hoodie and covered up with Mr. Baker running up the street to get to the house, right?
Yes, sir.
And you go right to the front door and get into the house, and that's when it's 1, 2, 3, go, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Baker say anything to you about why you had to hurry to do this?
How about this?
He said we only have a small window.
He said you had a small window. Did he tell you why you had a small window?
Sustained.
Did he?
Sustained the objection.
Oh, it's the same. Did he tell you at that time that Monica was at Target and she would be coming home and you had to finish that before she got home?
Said she was at the store.
At the store. He didn't say Target.
He said this prior to us even going.
Okay, and he said she was at the store and you had to get this done before she got back from the store, right?
She's gonna go to the store. We only have a small window. We have to go now. Put this on. We went. He put me in the trunk. He drove there. I was in the trunk for a little bit. He opened the trunk.
I
He ran up
understand,
the
Mr.
hill.
Nelson.
He said, "You with me?" And I didn't say anything. He started jogging, and I would lag behind him. And when we got to the house, he said he should be on the patio. The front door was open, and that's when everything happened.
Okay, you told us that before. I appreciate that. My question is, he had told you sometime while you were jogging up or in the car or when you got there, you had a small window because she was at a store, correct?
Yes.
Well, if she was in on the conspiracy, why couldn't she just have waited at the store longer and given you time to leave?
Sustained.
Mr. Austin, you were also told as part of your negotiations with the district attorney's office through your attorney, Mr. Aval, you understand he was the one going to be talking to the district attorney's office about a deal after you had your proffer, correct?
Yes, sir.
But while you were there, were you told that if any disposition is offered to you, it'll be, assuming one is, it'll be contingent upon you testifying at any and all court proceedings, whether trial motions, and as many individuals are as involved in the conspiracy as we're able to verify and put together. You understand that? They asked you that. Did you understand that?
Yes, sir.
In other words, you were naming throughout your interview that someone who was conspiring with you and Mr. Baker to kill Fabio Sementilli was Alfred Birdsong, right?
Say that again, please.
Didn't you tell them, without going through all the transcripts, that every time there were conversations between you and Birdsong, you and Baker, they were usually three-way conversations, and Birdsong was on the other end, right?
Yes, sir.
And he was intimately involved in the planning of this murder. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, Miss Sementilli was never on those calls, was she?
Objection, cumulative.
Sustained.
And you never met her at all in Las Vegas in July, as previously stated. Isn't that correct?
Objection, cumulative.
Sustained.
So any three-way calls were always just between you and Baker and Birdsong, correct?
Objection, cumulative.
Sustained.
When they advised you about having to testify in any other proceedings, was that explained to you by Mr. Aval, or did the prosecution explain to you what that meant?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Let me read the language again.
Counsel, what page?
I'm sorry, it's page 48 of the proffer, number 1, lines 10 to 18. 10 to 18. Forget the underlining. Could you read to yourself line 10? If you want, you can start at line 9. I'm sorry.
I don't think what I'm saying. This is the best way to. But that's page 40.
If I said 51, I'm sorry. I thought it said page 48. Do you want to read it back? No, I'm just. You got it now?
I'm still objecting it's cumulative, but
I already ruled.
All right, Mr. Austin. Let's try it again. Can you read, why don't you read from lines 8 to 18 to yourself? I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that.
It's okay.
Okay, does that refresh your memory as to what you were told by the prosecutors on the first day of the proffer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you to read it verbatim. If it's okay, I'm going to ask you, did they tell you, well, before then, you said you're trying to remember, and they said, you said, I'm trying to remember, so forgive me. You were talking about other things, correct?
Yes, sir.
So throughout your proffer, you forgot things, and they reminded you, and then you said, I'm trying to remember. Right? That first statement?
Yes, sir.
Were you trying to remember what they wanted you to say?
No, sir.
Okay. So let's go to this. No, there's nothing to forgive. There's no apology needed. I just wanted to put that on the record.
I'm going to object to reading.
Oh, obviously it was done before.
I'll also want to put on the record, since we're getting into it now, other individuals besides Monica Sementilli and Robert Baker, that if any disposition is offered to you, you know that means a plea negotiation, a deal, right?
Yes, sir.
If any disposition is offered to you, it will be assuming a disposition is offered, so you knew it didn't have to be, right?
Yes, sir.
It will be contingent upon you testifying at any and all court proceedings, whether it's trial, motions, on as many individuals as are involved in the conspiracy that we're able to verify and put together. You understand that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said, yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir, I did.
And how did you understand that? What did you understand that to mean?
That they were going to ask about other names.
Like Mr. Birdsong?
That was one of them.
Well, he was the one who was involved in the conspiracy to kill Fabio Sementilli along with you and Robert Baker, correct?
Yes, sir.
Didn't you tell them throughout your proffer on 2 days that he was in on all the phone calls, he was in on the planning, correct?
I told them, I believe I remember hearing him on the three-way calls. Yes, sir.
He was telling you about whether you should use a knife or a gun, remember?
That was a conversation amongst Baker and Birdsong that I was in.
And you?
Yes.
And how to do it quickly and whether you could do it quickly, remember?
Objection to
Sustained.
So you understand then that if Mr. Birdsong is ever here, which he's not, you may be called to testify against him like you've been called to testify against Miss Sementilli. Is that right?
That is my understanding.
But with Mr. Birdsong, you never left anything out when you were talking about him to the detectives or anyone else. You told them the whole truth from the beginning, right?
No, they asked me if I knew who that was, and I told them yes.
And they asked you more questions about him, correct?
I told them that he knew about it. Yes.
Well, I'm not going to go through everything I just said. You told him that he was part of the three-way calls when you were discussing with Baker how to do it. He was part of the planning. He was part of everything, right?
Objection to
Sustained.
And even after the murder, he kept in touch with you. Isn't that right?
Objection to
Sustained.
And again, you don't see him here in court, do you?
Objection
Sustained.
This is a couple more things and we'll be done, at least on this end, Mr. Austin. What is your state of mind now? What is your testimony now, as you've given it yesterday? Now let me ask you, is it still that you met Monica Sementilli at LA Fitness in July of 2016?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
Well, I'd like to, that's just foundational.
Counsel, get to whatever question you want to ask.
And that you met her at LA Fitness in July of last year.
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
Did you testify or state in the proffer, were you asked And when, I'm sorry, this is page 60, lines 13 to 24.
I would object to counsel point of read that's already been asked and answered.
I don't know where it is.
This is from the proffer. I'm asking if you told them, or you were asked when you first met Monica prior to the murder, for the first time at LA Fitness, and didn't you tell them it was 4 or 5 months before the murder, September or October of 2016? Didn't you say that?
Yes, sir.
So at some point in September or October of 2016, you went to LA Fitness with Rob, and you met Monica there in person, correct?
That's what I remember.
That was the first time you'd met her.
Sustained.
So you didn't meet her in July at the Aria Hotel in 2016, did you?
Objection
Sustained.
Is it a fair statement, Mr. Austin, that you've testified in this courtroom that you previously lied to the DA in Vancouver, correct?
Objection
Sustained.
You lied to the DA and the detectives in the Perkins, correct?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
And now you're lying when you say that Monica Sementilli was involved in the planning and the murder of Mr. Sementilli. You're lying about that to get a deal. Isn't that true?
No, sir, it is not.
And that deal, just so we're clear, is a plea to second-degree murder, correct?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
But I just want to ask, Your Honor, do you understand when you made this deal that if they didn't agree, that you not only would not get the deal, but you could be charged with first-degree murder as well? You understood that?
Objection, same facts on evidence.
Sustained.
So you made the statements that we've gone through here today. You understood they had to be valuable to the prosecution, and then what happened? Did they offer you a deal right away?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
They had to go away and come back and then offer this deal to you that we've gone through several times, correct?
Objection cumulative.
Sustained.
And if you didn't take that deal, the consequences would be as we just discussed, correct?
Objection, assumes facts on evidence.
Sustained.
But, and I'll be done, Your Honor, but do you understand that what the deal was based on is you testifying in court to what you testified to eventually in the proffer? Isn't that right?
Objection, again, assumes facts on evidence and states the testimony.
Sustained.
Do you really believe if you got up here and said, no, she wasn't involved and that's the truth, that somehow the judge would believe you and you go home?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
You knew you had to say that she was involved, that she got money. You had to. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. Are you charged with, in this, what you pled to, with financial gain? Getting a financial gain from the murder? They dropped that, didn't they?
Objection, assumes facts on evidence.
Sustained.
Well, the charge that you pled with was second-degree murder with use of a knife, I believe.
Objection,
It's,
cumulative.
it's an exhibit.
Cumulative.
There's nothing in there.
I'll allow this.
There's nothing in there about financial gain, is there?
No, sir.
And you ended up getting as much financial gain as Mr. Baker did, didn't you?
Sustained on the second count.
Do you know why you're not charged with financial gain?
Sustained?
That was part of the deal, that you would not be charged with that. Isn't that true?
Objection, speculation, since that's not enough.
Sustained on both.
Thank you very much for your patience, Your Honor.
Will there be any recross?
Sure.
All right. We're going to take our morning recess at this time.
Mr. Austin, I have a brief redirect of you. In Washington, when you were up there, we talked about that at length, October of 2024. Just to be clear, when Detective Farrell first came to your cell to talk to you, he actually didn't bring up the name Monica to you then, right?
I believe he said woman.
In fact, he said a lady. We have your uncle and a lady in custody, right?
Yes.
So when you talked to your cellmate, who you believed to be a cellmate but was an undercover agent, you knew who the lady was, even though they didn't tell you Monica Sementilli. You knew who the lady was at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you continued some of the conversations that we talked about yesterday when you spoke with your cellmate. You were referencing the defendant, and that's before anyone said her name. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Also, when you were up there at that time, when we were in Vancouver, again, not going through it, you asked to speak to me, but I know there's a lot of questions about it. You did repeatedly ask, said you wanted to go home and you wanted to see your girls. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go home?
No, ma'am.
Did you see your girls?
No, ma'am.
Well, you saw your wife at the station briefly, though, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, defense counsel went through a couple of different transcript excerpts with you when you were asking for a deal. And you did state words to the effect of, you wanted to go home, what kind of deal. And page 84, and this is what defense counsel went through before.
Line, please.
19. I said to you, I can't make you any promises or deals either today, but I can at least, just so you know that, do you want to think about it? That was at the beginning of our conversation when I spoke with you, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And just to be clear, you had already interviewed with the detectives at length, and you'd been in the cell with your undercover agent for hours. It was the end of the day when all the interviews were over and you were done in the cell that you asked to speak to me. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ask to speak to me because at that point you still were very stressed out, you wanted to see your family, you've been taken out of your car, and you were trying to see through me if I could help you with that?
Yes, ma'am.
And you asked me if you were being charged.
Yes, ma'am.
And we went on later in that conversation, and I told you again that yes, you are going to be charged.
Yes, ma'am.
During any of this time then, when you were asking if there's a deal, did myself or the detectives ever say, we need you to come to Los Angeles and testify against Monica Sementilli and tell us everything that she did? Did we ever say anything like that to you?
No, ma'am.
Did we ever make any promises to you that if you testify against Monica Sementilli, we'll give you a certain deal or you'll get to go home, anything of that nature?
No, ma'am.
In fact, the majority of the interview, was it even focused on Monica Sementilli, or was it focused on your role in what you did?
It is.
Defense counsel also asked you about wanting to go to LA. Did you ask to go to Los Angeles?
No, ma'am.
Did you have a choice?
No, ma'am.
And in fact, did you ask me, the word was extradited, am I being extradited there? And I told you, yes, you are, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember asking if you could stay in Washington and do it virtual?
I do.
and you were told no, that you're going to LA and you're going to be charged.
Yes, ma'am.
When defense counsel asked you about testifying, there is one time that you asked me about testifying. And I told you, I don't know. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
We never talked, you or the detectives or myself, about testifying while we were in Washington. We never talked about that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Just touching on those gold coins, and I don't want to go back through it though. You testified where you saw them from. When Baker came to the car, he had a pillowcase he testified to, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if those coins were in the pillowcase?
I did not.
Do you remember anything about that pillowcase? What color it was? Anything?
Like a tealish green? Not really. It wasn't a bright color.
Okay. But on that same drive then, when he came to the car with the pillowcase with items in it, that same course of actions when he gave you those cold coins and told you where he got them from the safe. Is that accurate?
When he got in the car?
Yes.
He's got in the car with a pillowcase.
And then he gave you the coins at what point again?
When he dropped me off at the bus station.
Okay. And that's when he told you where they came from.
He told me to tell him they came from, if anybody asks, tell them they came from me. These come from the safe.
The proffer, defense counsel talked to you about the proffer that you did in Los Angeles when you spoke to the detectives as well as the prosecutors. And do you recall, and defense counsel pointed to some transcripts, and it's the proffer, part 1, which is day 1, page 7, line 1. As your attorney has indicated, this is Ms. Silverman speaking to you, there are no promises. There are no offers on the table at this time. Based on what you tell us today, the value of that information, whether or not the information that you provide to us can be corroborated or verified by other sources, all that will come into play. The term corroborated was used. Do you remember hearing that?
Yes, ma'am.
And Ms. Silverman went on page 7, line 12, to say, at that point, assuming that you provide information that we are able is truthful, that is valuable in some manner, and that can be verified, then and only then may the district attorney's office engage in some type of plea negotiation with your lawyer. So it wasn't just based on your testimony. You were told your testimony, if it has value, but independently, if we can verify it, that's when we will start a possible negotiation with your attorney. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that how you understood the proffer to occur, that your role was to tell the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further.
Anything further?
Yes. Who was going to decide if it was verified?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
When they said if it's verified and if it's valuable, you understood that these two district attorneys, deputy district attorneys, were going to be the ones to decide if it was verifiable and if it was valuable, correct?
Objection, speculation, and assumes facts and evidence.
Sustained.
And you understood that the only thing you had to add to what you said up north is that Monica Sementilli was involved. That's the only thing you had to add. And if you added that, you were going to get a deal. You understood that, didn't you?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained. I'm sorry, there's one question.
I'm sorry, I was.
That's sustained.
Mr. Austin, is it your testimony that in October of last year, before the police came to you, that you did not know the name Monica Sementilli?
Objection cumulative.
I'll allow this one question.
That I did not know.
Right.
Pardon?
I asked you questions about, didn't they tell you it was Monica and so forth, and the DA just said, well, they didn't mention Monica's name, so I'm asking you, did you know Monica Sementilli was involved in the prosecution of this case when you met with the police in October of last year?
I knew she was involved. I did not know her name.
Well, let me remind you, Mr.
Well, I'm going to object to the start of that question.
I'm going to hear the question.
Isn't it true that following your returning to San Francisco, Alaska, or sometime after the murder took place, you spoke with Mr. Baker on the phone? Right? Three-way call. Right?
Objection cumulative.
I'll allow this.
Are you asking me when I got back to Alaska?
Anytime after the murder.
I spoke to him on the phone.
And how long was that after the murder?
I called him as soon as I landed.
Okay. What'd you talk about?
I landed.
That's it?
That's it.
You didn't talk about Monica?
I landed.
And you spoke with Mr. Birdsong several times after the murder and before October of last year, correct?
Objection cumulative and beyond scope.
I'll allow this.
Can you ask the question again, please?
Between the time of the murder and October 2nd of last year, when you were brought up, or you were arrested in Vancouver and questioned by the police and the Perkins guy and the Stagel and so forth, had you spoken to Mr. Birdsong?
Prior to my arrest?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
You spoke to him many times, correct?
Yes, sir.
About being safe and what to do and so forth and stay out of trouble and all sorts of advice, correct?
Yes, sir.
He didn't tell you that Monica Sementilli had been arrested along with Mr. Baker?
I found that out a while ago,
What's a while ago?
shortly after they were arrested.
And they were arrested in 2017, correct?
I get a few months, yes.
So by the time you got up to Vancouver, they didn't have to tell you that Monica was the only one not convicted yet or was on trial. You knew that.
Objection vague is the time.
So ruled.
I didn't know anything. I didn't pay attention to anything.
You did not know by October of 2024 that Monica Sementilli had been arrested with Mr. Baker and was facing trial here in Los Angeles for 7 years? You didn't know that?
I found that out after I was arrested, but I knew she was arrested prior.
Mr. Birdsong never spoke to you at all about Monica Sementilli? Between
One moment.
June of 2017 until you were arrested in 2024, he never spoke to you at all about Monica Sementilli?
I was told,
My question is, did he ever speak to you? Non-responsive.
Non-responsive, counsel.
It's a yes or no. Did he speak to you about Monica Sementilli having been arrested with Mr. Baker and facing prosecution for murder?
the name never came up.
The name never came up.
Hey, they were arrested.
I'm sorry,
Hey, they were arrested.
but he never mentioned Monica.
Just so I'm clear, your question is, Did Mr. Birdsong ever mention the name Monica?
Yeah, before October 24th, 2024, did you know that it was Monica Sementilli who was being charged with Robert Baker?
I think the question to you is that your question? Did he mention the name Monica?
All right, let's start with that.
He did not mention the name. The words were, I believe, hey, they were arrested.
But he talked to you, according to you, in recorded conversations, he spoke to you many times between the arrest and October 2024, didn't he? Birdsong?
Yes.
He called you all the time.
That's a little vague. What is
Well-
your definition of all the time?
He called you often to check in on you.
Yes.
And you're telling this court and the jury that in October of 2024, you still didn't know that her name was Monica.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Officer.
Anything further? Other people?
So yes, Mr. Birdsong, based on defense's questions, Mr. Birdsong, when you did talk to him, he referred to them as they got arrested, right?
Yes.
And during this phone call that Mr. Birdsong had with you, he was upset and told you he was very upset because she was letting Baker take the blame for everything.
One moment.
This is hearsay, non-responsive, and it goes beyond the scope.
Sustain.
Well, did Mr. Birdsong tell you he was upset about how the case was unfolding?
Hearsay.
Sustain.
We opened it up, but okay.
No, counsel. Anything further?
No.
Any further?
Just want to ask if you know that all the statements from the police and everyone that's interviewed in this case have all been taken forward. Yes, beyond the scope. Okay. But I would make a request concerning his availability following today's testimony.
I'm sure it'll be available.
Okay. So not to be excused then.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short recess. We'll set up the program for the next witness. And I mean short, like about 2 minutes. So the edit supplies. See you back here soon.